Do you remember the last time you saw Lewis Hamilton lead with authority in his house circuit? Because what happened in Silverstone in the practices of the GP of Great Britain was not only special, it was historical. But is this just a nostalgic flash or the definitive rebirth of the seven-time champion? On the other hand, internally in Ferrari, a growing pressure was breathed. The expectations deposited in the Leclerc-Hamilton duo were very high. The team needed results not only for points but for reputation. After a promising 2024, but insufficient, Ferrari could not afford another season without a clear direction. Silverstone then was not another stop on the calendar. It was an open trial for Ferrari, for Hamilton, and for the joint project they have decided to build from scratch. And when the green flag fell in Friday's practices, all that doubts, mistakes, criticism was out of the cabin. What followed was a performance that seemed taken from the best archive of the British champion. A declaration of intentions, with the ward of the English public as a backdrop and the respectful silence of the paddock recognizing what he had just seen. In that context, the GP of Great Britain was not only another career. It was the first big chapter of the Hamilton-Ferrari version. The first free training session of the Great Prize of Great Britain was not only a speed sample by Lewis Hamilton, it was an almost perfect technical execution, which served in direct response to all the questions raised in the first 3 weekends of competition. From the first moment, the British pilot was comfortable, safe, and most importantly, fast. On a track like Silverstone, where the high-speed layout, the curves on average in high lateral load, and the fluidity of the rhythm force a millimeter balance between aerodynamics and traction, the fact that Hamilton led the FP1 was much more than a good chrono. It was a technical validation. The time of 1:26,892 placed it at the top, in a session where the conditions were optimal, 22 degrees of ambient temperature and an asphalt marking 38, allowing the tires to reach their ideal thermal window quickly. But what caught the attention most was the consistency in his rhythm. Unlike other Fridays where pilots try multiple configurations without necessarily looking for absolute performance, Hamilton seemed to have a clear road map from the first stint. His laps were progressively faster, without braking locks, without notable corrections in the direction, and with a clean transition between high-speed curves such as Copse, Maggots, and Beckett's. The precision with which each turn executed evidenced something that goes beyond talent. The meticulous work in simulator and the process of adaptation to a car that until a few weeks ago felt alien. The SF-25, particularly sensitive to balance changes due to temperature or aerodynamic load, reacted with stability under their hands. There was no survival or critical subwiring, two ills that have accompanied Ferrari in key sessions this season. In addition, the not less that Hamilton surpassed all his rivals in that first batch with real rhythm difference, not by circumstance. Lando Norris, in his McLaren, was just 23 thousandths, but that does not tarnish the fact that Ferrari's British was the first to put the technical bar of the weekend. This was also significant from the psychological point of view. It was not just the fastest turn, it was the fact of having dominated that first batch for the first time in the whole season, leaving aside China's sprint. And doing so in Silverstone gave it a tremendous emotional and narrative weight. In a paddock who has questioned his signing, his age, and his ability to perform outside Mercedes, this Friday was his way of responding without a single word. The message was clear: it still has control. The result was a powerful image. A serene Hamilton in the box, listening to its engineers, adjusting minimal details. A scene that remembers the great moments of his dominant era. And while the rest of Ferrari's garage watched the data on screen, they could not ignore reality. For the first time in the year, the SF-25 was a refined, fast, effective tool, and in the right hands. Silverstone allowed Hamilton to feel what it is to mark the pattern. Not only in front of his audience, but in front of a Formula One that had begun to doubt it. This FP1 was more than a good batch. It was a statement. A warning that the seven-time world champion is not in Ferrari to retire. It is to fight. The second free practice session changed the script completely. If the FP1 had been a blunt sample of Hamilton and Ferrari's power, the FP2 showed the other face of the currency. McLaren's counterattack, the strategic versatility of the top teams, and the consolidation of a technical balance that promises an extremely closed weekend. Lando Norris, motivated by the minimum difference that separated him from Hamilton in the first session, went on track with determination. From the first minutes, it was noted that the MCL-39 had been adjusted with surgical precision. The behavior of the car in high-load areas, especially in the Maggots and Beckett sequences, improved markedly. The Papaya team refined rear stability, one of its weak points in the FP1, and that resulted in absolute confidence for Norris, which managed to mark a time of 25,816, the fastest of the day. This performance not only snatched the first place from Hamilton, but also displaced Charles Leclerc to second place, leaving the Monegasque pilot to plus 0.222s of the leader. Hamilton meanwhile closed the batch thirdly at only plus 0.301s of the best chrono, a margin that, although small, reflects how competition for technical leadership is more open than ever. The difference among the top three was less than 4/10. In modern Formula One, that is practically a draw. McLaren's improvement occurred both quickly and in a long batch rhythm. While Norris shone in individual turns, Oscar Piastri was responsible for consolidating the performance of the race simulation team, staying within the top four and registering competitive times return after return. The balance between the two pilots, the reading of the circuit and the adaptation to the conditions of the asphalt made it clear that McLaren not only has a fast car, but also technical tools to optimize it in real time. But Ferrari was not far behind. Although they did not dominate this time, the SF25 showed something that had so far been elusive: consistency in stint largo. In this second session, a clear improvement in the degradation management of tires was observed, particularly in the average compound, where both Hamilton and Leclerc managed to maintain a stable time for more than 12 consecutive laps. This, considering that Sunday's career is usually defined by the conservation of the tires and the execution of the strategy, is an encouraging sign for the Scuderia. In parallel, the rest of the top teams also began to adjust their cards. Max Verstappen, after a complicated FP1, appeared in fifth position with a time less than half of the leader, but still evidencing a lack of harmony between RB21 and Silverstone's demands. The Dutch expressed his radio frustration, pointing out difficulties with the rear train and a lack of traction when leaving the slow curves, symptoms of a car still in the process of fine adjustment. For his part, Mercedes was again unknown. George Russell managed to place himself in the top 5 in the FP1, but in the FP2 he did not find the ideal balance. The W15 showed instability in rapid sections and difficulties in maintaining the optimal temperature of the gums, which prevented him from approaching the times of the leaders. Kimi Antonelli, even in the process of adaptation, focused on data collection work. The most relevant of this FP2 was not simply the change of positions. It was the confirmation that we are facing a high-precision struggle between three giants: McLaren, Ferrari, and Red Bull, each with specific strengths, but without a clear superiority that defines the weekend in advance. In that environment, the reaction capacity, track reading, and strategic execution will be the factors that tilt the balance. Hamilton's performance in Silverstone practices cannot be understood simply as an outstanding performance of a Friday. It is much more than that. We are facing a moment that could reconfigure the narrative of the 2025 championship. For the first time in the season, the British pilot has managed to find a real balance with the SF25, and not only from the technical point of view, but also emotional. And that connection between pilot and machine in an environment as symbolic as Silverstone can have a catalyst effect for the rest of the calendar. For Hamilton, however, the implications are even deeper. His decision to leave Mercedes after a relationship of more than a decade was received with skepticism in many sectors of paddock. Doubts about whether could adapt to a new ecosystem, a new technical philosophy, and especially a car with an inheritance as unpredictable as Ferrari were not few. And in part they were justified. His performance in the first calendar appointments made it clear that the learning curve was more steep than anticipated. But what happened in Silverstone rewrites part of that script. Seeing Hamilton lead a session, fighting inequality with Norris and Leclerc, and handling the long batches with strategic efficiency, is a direct message to the contestants for the title. It means that, although its beginning was hesitant, the possibility of a second half of the powerful season is more alive than ever. And more importantly, it shows that Hamilton still retains the ability to evolve, to adapt, to reinvent yourself, a quality that defines the true greats. At the championship level, its position is not yet dominant. But what begins to establish is a new psychological balance. Until now, the focus was almost exclusively in McLaren dominators of the beginning and in the expected recovery of Red Bull with Verstappen. However, if Ferrari consolidates the rhythm shown in Silverstone, pressure dynamics will change. Suddenly, McLaren will no longer run free. Red Bull, already beaten by internal problems and the inconsistency of the RB21, must look towards the masks more frequently. And Mercedes, still caught in his reinvention process with the W15, could be left behind. In that context, Silverstone is not just one more circuit. It is the ideal thermometer to measure the competitive maturity of the equipment. It is a demanding track with high-speed curves, technical transitions, and an aerodynamic demand that does not allow lies. If you are fast in Silverstone, you can be fast in almost any other calendar circuit. And what Hamilton showed in this path implies that Ferrari has found a base from which to build, and that he, as a pilot, still has the ability to run at the elite level under pressure. It remains to be seen if this will result in results during Sunday's race. But beyond the podium or victory, the real achievement of this Friday was to reinsert Hamilton and Ferrari in the center of the competitive map. Not as distant candidates, but as tangible threats. At this point, there is a question that cannot be ignored. Was this just a fleeting spark, or are we witnessing the beginning of something much bigger? Because what Hamilton has demonstrated in Silverstone is not limited to times of practice. What is at stake is much deeper. It is the real possibility of altering the direction of a championship that many gave decided early. And there you enter. What do you think? Do you think this Hamilton performance is a sign that you can fight for regular victories in the remainder of the year? Or do you think is still far from McLaren's sustained rhythm? Leave your opinion below. What did you see in Ferrari Hamilton? How do you think Maranello's team will evolve from here?